Oh, Kids Chapel. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. The kids may leave for Kids Chapel with Miss Heidi and with Isabella. You don't have the right to be angry or frustrated over something you have the power to change just because you have chosen not to change. Those are the words of a man by the name of Grote. Grote is the leader of Life Church, the church which sponsors the Bible app that most of us use on our devices, and the very Bible app that we use for the events app here at St. Matthias. And in essence, that's what Craig said in one of his leadership podcasts. You don't have the right to be angry or frustrated over something you have the power to change just because you have chosen not to change it. These words have resonated with me since I heard them a few months ago. And this morning, I want to share a part of my story with you. And I'm going to lay it bare, so to speak, which I feel comfortable doing, especially since what I will share is not the same today as it was just 4 or 5 months ago. And by no means do I convey this and communicate this to you to garner your sympathies or to have you thinking only about me as you walk out of the church today. I actually say it to aid us in our understanding and our approach to today's topic of empowering others and the journey we are talking about with living committed lives. This month, several people have asked me, why are we considering this series about commitment? And I've shared some of the story with those who have asked, and I thought, well, I might as well go ahead and share it with everyone today. Those who were here in June know that we had a short congregational meeting after worship one Sunday. And during that meeting, and then in the letter that followed it, we communicated the looming need we will have financially. Suddenly, without much prior expectation, and certainly without any preparation, starting this past summer, we knew that we would lose $2,000 a month in income. Then starting the next year, as the diocesan headquarters transitions to Bishop Sutton in Dallas, and as Bishop Grote begins his retirement from the diocese, he'll still be the presiding bishop, but retiring from the diocese in the next couple of years, we would also lose about another $1,000 a month in rent. So at the very least, our budget would be reduced by $36,000 a year. And if you know anything about our budget, we don't have a very large budget. Our budget is only about $130,000 total. So that's a 25% reduction. And as a person who is very financially minded and in charge of the financial matters of the diocese, of our seminary, and of our board of foreign missions for the denomination, I know what those things could mean. It would mean one of two things. Either we sell the building so we don't have those maintenance costs, or my salary would have to be severely slashed, and I'd have to go to work outside the church again. And in the midst of this, at the time, the thought came to my mind. If people would just do what they're supposed to do, then everything would just work itself out. If we all just gave 10%, as the biblical standard says, with the tithe, then the church wouldn't have to worry about what would happen. We would actually have more money than we need. And during that meeting in June, I communicated some of my frustration. But it wasn't just frustration and worry about the finances. I was also frustrated because it seemed that the more we tried to do stuff, the more it seemed people didn't support it. I mean, it seemed like there was an indifference in supporting the work of the church overall. During our meetings in 2014, we came up with different ideas. Yet when we tried to do some of them, they weren't really supported very well. Balls were dropped in some cases. Interest wasn't there in other cases, despite what we had said in our meetings. And in the end, I felt like I was holding the ball for it all, or I was watching them be dropped. And on top of these things, our marriages have been under attack for the past several years. Divorces in my own family. Divorces and struggles in other marriages. Some in the parish, some out of the parish. Some with friends whom I even performed the marriage ceremony for. We talk about how marriage is under attack from the secular and political side of things, but it's not just on that side. There's a war on marriage and on people's souls, even within the church, much more than I think we've ever found before. And amidst all of this, I'm going to be honest with you, there was a lot of frustration. I mean, I'm the kind of guy who just grins and bears it. I acknowledge that about myself. You just buck up and you do what you got to do. It's one thing that's both a great quality, but it's also a drawback and a danger. There was fear. There was anxiety. There was pain. There was outright bitterness. There was a sense of isolation. There was a desire for isolation. And there was a very low time of trying to figure out what the heck the sense was. I had no desire to preach. I had no desire to lead. I had no desire to be here. What would be, would be. Comme ci, comme ça, c'est la vie. The weight of the world felt like it was on me. The battle was being fought, and I was losing. I felt like I was in competition with those who I was supposed to lead. Why can't people just do what they're supposed to do? Why don't people do what they say they will do after all I do? And every time I said that, I'd feel guilty. But I'd feel justified. I'm justified because I would say, I've done my part. But everyone else has not. And are you ready for this statement? Because this is a tough statement. I haven't failed. Everyone else has failed me. What a dangerous statement. But that's what happens when we look at things in certain ways. And that's where I was, just in June. And I said as much in that meeting, in that I had truly considered leaving St. Matthias. I started asking Liz whether I should throw my hat in the ring for other parishes privately, and I never even said it to her. I even thought about getting out of the ministry altogether. And I said to someone else, at that point, not now, I have never been so unhappy in all 16 years of my ministry as I was the past year. You ever felt like that? It's a tough place to be in. You're totally disempowered, rendered powerless in what you can do, and the only thing you can really do is to blame everyone else. Now enter into that picture two different things. First, as the vestry worked on forming the letter that was sent to the entire congregation in July, you all got that letter. We had some great interaction and collaboration between our vestry members. One vestry member basically stood up and he said, "This is being approached from a position of fear." By that, this person meant this: we are trying to motivate people by fear and failing to do our, quote, duty instead of from purpose and blessing. Do we give to St. Matthias because we're afraid of God? Do we give to St. Matthias because we're afraid Father Jason won't get a salary and might have to get another job? Do we give to St. Matthias because we might lose the building and have to be selling it? Do we give to St. Matthias simply because the Bible says that we should give? Some of these are the realities of what could happen if we don't meet our budget. But they're not our motivation. And that is what my mind first latched onto in that July vestry meeting. I have to say, we have a good vestry. And the input, the interaction, and the feedback recently has been very fruitful and extremely meaningful to me. Here's the truth. We don't live and we should not approach the Christian life from a sense of duty. We live the Christian life because of how enjoyable it is. We don't live in a certain way because we are commanded to. We live in a certain way because we know that living that way is really living a blessed and joyful life. We don't give to God out of a sense of fear, but because we are thankful to God and desire to support His work. There's always a dread and a fear when you try to live your life in fear of God's laws. But there is joy and there's freedom in living your life as God prepared it for you to live in. In other words, we don't live out of a sense of duty and fear, but out of joy and purpose. As one author said, Christianity is not a set of regulations and instructions, but a life-giving relationship with the person by whom and for whom we were created. It's not a matter of telling us what to do. It's rather a matter of God empowering us to be the people that we were meant to be. And how easy it is to lose focus of that truth. And it took one of our vestry members in our discussions to remind me of that. Second, I heard those words I quoted when we first began. In the podcast, I heard those words. You can't be angry over something you have the power to change just because you have chosen not to change it. If you're a parent, I suggest you hear those words. If you're a friend in a troubled friendship, I suggest you hear those words. If you're a boss, I suggest you hear those words. If you're a spouse, I suggest you hear those words. You can't be angry over something you have the power to change just because you have chosen not to change it. It was literally a dagger in my heart. That's when it all changed. That's when my focus changed. That's where my perspective changed. That's where, in the words of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, my life got flipped upside down. Sometimes our focus is so intent on the things that we can't control in others that we fail to see that what we can control contributes to the change in others. The intent of the author of those words was this: as a leader, you determine the culture, you determine the vision, you communicate and instill the values, you help people live into that calling and that purpose, you give people the tools they need to help and to participate, and when you do these things, big changes happen. In other words, you don't try to control from a sense of duty and requirement, you empower from a sense of purpose and culture. You don't and can't forcibly change people and their behavior, but you change the culture so that people can change. This is where it all changed. I said it earlier that in my low, I saw it before as everyone has failed me. But the truth is that I have failed. I failed myself. I failed the parish. I failed everyone else. And while they may sound like harsh words to say about yourself, they are the most liberating and joyful words that you can say. Because in recognizing that, the control which is not really controllable is not my concern. As a leader, as someone who is committed, my focus is to establish and build a culture where others can live out their purpose and their commitment. To establish a culture not where people are responsible for simply for the purpose of doing some task for me, but where you can be responsible for yourself and the desire to live out your purpose and calling as you grow in your life and in God. And in an instant, and I mean in a mere moment of inner reflection on that principle, everything was gone. That's why empower is my new favorite word. We empower people, and we are empowered ourselves as we empower people. And that's what we need to do in our marriages. That's what we need to do in our church. That's what we need to do in our parenting. That's what we need to do in our job. Our job isn't to control and to try to get anyone just to do. Our calling is to empower people so that they can do. And as I reread the scriptures, and as I consider stories anew in the Old Testament and the New, as I approach the exhortations or the models of Christ or the apostles, and how they began and they continued their ministries, it presents a new perspective. Our mission in the church is to enrich and empower people with the grace and strength of God. Our mission in the church is to enrich and empower people with the grace and strength of God. That every single person, whether he or she be a non-believer, who is curious about Jesus or is struggling with the disconnect in their life and trying to find their way, or whether it be the person who may have shallow roots and struggles with their faith because they don't understand things, or they have circumstances in their life that are strangling them, or whether he or she be the person who is mature in their faith, who doesn't seem to waver too much. All across the spectrum of spiritual maturity, our mission is to help every single person in between these walls and out there, wherever we go. Our mission and purpose is to help them realize who they are in Jesus Christ and the great blessing they have in living that life. Our purpose is to connect people with God and to help them empower them so that they can grow in their life with Him. Empowerment comes through creating a culture of growth. Empowerment comes through a culture of growth where you yourself can grow along with those beside you. And that applies whether it be in the church, your marriage, your children, your co-workers, or even your teammates if you're in sports. And while this applies to leadership, and while we may not all be in official leadership positions, the truth is that we are all in positions of leadership. We may not be the main boss and have those responsibilities, but we are still leading in the sense that leadership is not just about the position of authority, but about the position of influence over another. So whether you're a student or whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent or whether you're a child, or whether you are the boss or you're an employee or the team captain or the water boy, whether you are the husband or whether you are the wife, your responsibilities may be different, but you are still in a privileged position of empowering another by helping to establish and maintain a culture of growth. As the scriptures say concerning the church, we are a kingdom of priests, each ministering to each other as the Spirit has given us ability. We may not be the person in charge with those specific responsibilities, but we are all ministers to each other, for each other, and also to the world. So we all help establish a culture of growth, where we ourselves and those to whom we commit can grow. Now there are a couple of things I want to draw our attention to, which can help with this, with empowering others. And I'll go through this as quickly as I can, by only highlighting 3 main points. Like last week, instead of trying to jam everything into one sermon, I'll instead say a few words about each one. And then I'll incorporate them into sermons on a more regular basis moving forward. The first is empowering others. This is as much about you as it is about the others. We must start with our own selves. All the problems in this world are not the other person. All the possibility of good things happening do not lie with everyone else. The culture you wish to establish and the culture in which you participate starts with you. If you want to influence another life, start with yourself, not with them. You must make an honest look in the mirror. As Jesus said, take the plank out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye. What do you value? Do you actually do what you say you value? Look at your actions. What do your actions say that you value? Do they match up? Do they look completely different? If you find they don't look the same, then you must start changing your actions to match the values that you desire. You cannot empower others and create a culture of growth if you do not act in accordance with what you value. Furthermore, do not think that you are in this journey alone. The scriptures say that we're all given gifts for the purpose of the whole body. That through each of us participating and offering, the whole body may be complete. And there's two things with that. First, we cannot go it alone. None of us can be everything to everybody at all times. We must recognize that we need the help of others. Even in the imagery of scriptures, when the church is described as the body of Christ, we're told that Christ is the head. And what no one ever seems to say about this imagery is this: Christ is not the whole body. Christ is the head, and everyone else is his body. Christ needs his church. Christ needs you. We cannot go alone. Second, we all have a part to play. And when we do not, or when we do, or when we do not do our part, we hurt everyone else. Anyone who has ever stubbed a toe knows that when the smaller parts suffer, the whole body suffers. Anyone who's ever had back pain or knee pain knows that when one part of the body does not function as it should, the whole rest of the body can't function in the best way. Second, empowering others requires a clear vision and a common purpose. I'm not going to say too much on this today because I've already spoken to it in the first week and in the second week. We must know why we are doing what we are doing, and it must be clear. And this is what we're going to be looking at next week, specifically about St. Matthias. A clear vision and clear expectations are necessary. It is the centering focus of all things, and it must be the measuring stick of all things that we do. I mean, you may remember me saying at one point, action without purpose is simply busyness. And that is precisely what happens when people are not aligned around a common purpose. 11 players on a football field might all run around. Looked like U of H last night. But unless they're aligned around the right play, with the right intention, with the right purpose of being on the field, they will by no means function properly. If actions do not feed the vision, they should not be done. If actions do feed the vision, they should be strengthened. Effectiveness and commitment and empowering culture of growth only come through clear vision and a common purpose. Empowering others, this is the third point, requires honest feedback and communication. As children, we're often taught that disagreements and arguments are to be avoided at all costs. And I admit, as a parent, we reinforce those things. We yell when we tell our kids who start to argue, knock it off, don't fight, I'm going to put you in your separate rooms. And most of the time it's because we don't want to listen to it. When in reality, perhaps we should learn from our children. Okay, maybe not fighting the way that they fight, but learning to disagree, and to disagree peaceably and properly, is actually vital to building each other up. To speak tough words is difficult. To hear tough words is even more difficult, because we instinctively want to defend ourselves. But even Jesus tells us in Matthew 18, the chapter we read for our gospel, go to each other and talk it out. Jesus knows there's going to be disagreements. Jesus knows there'll be differences of opinion. Jesus knows there'll be personality conflicts. And the first answer is not to run away or to shove it under the carpet or even to shout it out. It is to communicate. To say yes when yes is needed. To say no when no is needed. To call another out in trust and love when they have failed. And to praise one another when they have done well. I mean, think about for a moment the most well-respected people in your own life. Those who impacted you in the most meaningful way. Is it about what they did for you? Is it about what they didn't say to you? Or is it about what they did in you? It's often how they helped move you inside. Inside your heart and in your mind, your emotions, in your soul. By taking that tough step to say something risky to you, or to challenge you to step up, or by holding you accountable to follow through on something. This is what results in growth and a change in thought and behavior. Feedback forms. We need honest communication. We need feedback. We need others to help in keeping us accountable so that what we say and what we do actually supports what we say we want to do and shines forth that which we say we value. Now with this, let me say this, and this is perhaps the biggest challenge for me personally, and I'm sure challenging for many people to learn, and even harder to enact. Silence is communication, and passivity is action. Silence is communication, passivity is action. But silence is destructive communication, and passivity is deadly action. We might think that when we do those things that we are just playing nice, that we are the bigger person for walking away, or that we are just keeping the peace. It's better to walk away than it is to fight, right? But here's the truth. In all areas of life, you will get a combination of two things. You will get a combination of what you create and what you allow. Silence and passivity will enable others in their behavior because you allow it. And then when it's repeated again and again and again, that same silence and that same passivity will consume you because you failed to deal with it. Not saying anything, ignoring it, whatever it is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than saying yes or no. You will get what you create and what you allow. And you cannot be angry at that which you have the power to change because you chose not to change it. Silence is destructive communication. Passivity is deadly action. Empower others with honest feedback and communication. And these are the only 3 points I'm going to bring to our attention today. Empowering is as much about you as it is about others. Empowering requires a clear vision and purpose, and empowering requires honest feedback and communication. And let me end our time today with this. Is all this just business talk? Is all this simply out of a bunch of different leadership books? Is this simply the story of Father Jason and his journey with St. Matthias? Is this stuff that is really applicable to the church? After all, aren't we just supposed to preach the Bible and God will take care of the rest? I'll say yes. Much of what we have considered over the past few weeks is found in many leadership books. But they are principles found in the Scriptures as well, even with God Himself. They are found in the way that God first created Adam and Eve and how He gave them dominion and how He interacted with them. They are found as God called Abraham out of his country and built them into a nation as they left Egypt under Moses. They are found with God as He established His monarchy with David. They are found with how God sent prophets to repeatedly call His people back to faithfulness. But most importantly, these same principles are all found with Jesus. As Jesus established His earthly ministry, as He called His disciples, as He related to and trained His disciples, and then as He empowered them, most especially on that day of Pentecost, and then how they went out to change the world. And that they did. They changed the world. The 12 men you see around these windows changed the world. Why? Because they were empowered, and then they empowered others. To the end of my story, I am not in the same place as I was in June, that's for sure. Nor do I see things the same way. And I look forward with excitement to what our parish can do as a whole when it is filled with empowered members. Let us pray.